Have you ever walked into a crowded room and noticed how everyone seems to gravitate toward one particular man? Not the loudest, not the richest, not the most famous or physically impressive. So, what is it? What makes this man stand out? He moves differently. While others' eyes dart from person to person, his gaze remains steady, focused. While some people's attention is fragmented, half in the moment, half chasing approval, his is undivided. He doesn't perform, he doesn't posture, he simply exists, confident, grounded, and present. Like this kind of insight? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. There's more powerful content coming your way. Now here's the fascinating part. Women sense this energy too. They relax around him. They open up in ways they rarely do with other men. Why? Because he's not trying to get something from them. Because he isn't performing or seeking approval. His energy demands nothing. His attention doesn't drain them. His presence allows them to be themselves. This isn't about a trick or tactic. It's not about dominance or seduction. It's about a deeper shift. A desexualized mind. Wait, desexualized. What does that mean? It doesn't mean weak. It doesn't mean repressed. It means a man who no longer lives in unconscious servitude to his sexual impulses. He still feels desire, perhaps even more intensely, but he's no longer possessed by it. Have you ever met someone like that? Someone whose awareness is so rooted in presence that you can actually feel it? Carl Jung, the father of depth psychology, said, "Where love rules there is no will to power, and where power predominates, their love is lacking." This distinction is everything. A desexualized mind doesn't eliminate desire, it integrates it. It transforms it from a compulsive force into a conscious choice. Quick pause. If you're finding this valuable, hit that like button. It really helps the channel reach more people like you. Now look around you. Billboards use bodies to sell everything from perfume to burgers. Social media thrives on objectification. TV, ads, entertainment. They all reduce women to visual commodities. Why? Because men who are unconsciously controlled by lust are predictable. They're easily manipulated, easily sold to, and easily distracted. In other words, unconscious men make great consumers. And the system, it doesn't want you conscious. But here's the truth. When you begin to shift, to differentiate your identity from that raw sexual drive, you stand out. Dramatically, you become magnetic in a whole new way. Your presence is rare, and therefore incredibly valuable. This is more than attraction, it's transformation. Women feel it. They sense when a man's gaze is clear, when it's connecting with them, not scanning their body for validation. They relax, they open, they speak from the heart. Why? Because they're being seen, not consumed. Have you noticed how women often chase the man who isn't chasing them? Why do they gravitate toward the man who doesn't need anything from them? It's not a strategy. It's not reverse psychology. It's authentic differentiation. And here's the irony. The moment you let go of the desperate need to get something, you actually become more attractive, more grounded, more real. Jung called this withdrawing the projections. When you stop projecting your fantasies and inner emptiness onto women, when you start seeing them as they truly are, something amazing happens. Your interactions become transformational, not just for them, for you. You listen deeply, you respond honestly, you connect authentically, and suddenly, attraction is no longer about tricks or games. It becomes about presence, integrity, and truth. What do you think? Have you experienced this shift? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this resonated with you, subscribe for more deep content like this. Like the video if it opened your eyes. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the world doesn't need more men chasing approval. It needs more men who are awake, who are whole, who are finally free. Have you ever experienced contentment without acquisition? Imagine a state where your sense of worth no longer depends on what you can get. Where your happiness isn't tied to the next hit of gratification, the next achievement, or the next approval. What if I told you, you already possess what you truly need? This is the beginning of a deeper transformation, what Carl Jung referred to as the transcendent function. It's the psyche's ability to create a third position that transcends inner conflict, rising above the push and pull of opposing forces. Jung called it a way of attaining liberation by one's own efforts, a path toward finding the courage to be yourself. And here's the key. A desexualized mind doesn't repress sexuality. It doesn't blindly indulge it, either. Instead, it transcends the opposition between repression and indulgence, finding a higher unity, a balance of restraint and expression. Can you imagine what your life would look like from that space? Because once you reach this state of integrated contentment, everything begins to shift. Your actions, once driven by a hunger for validation, become acts of genuine service. Your work, your relationships, your creative energy. They're no longer attempts to fill a void. They become authentic contributions to the world. Not because you've killed your desires, but because you've placed them in right relationship with a larger identity. Ever noticed how life responds differently to people who act from a place of wholeness, rather than fragmentation? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experience. Jung wasn't the only one who noticed this. Ancient spiritual texts echo the same truth. To everyone who has, more will be given, but from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. This isn't just spiritual poetry. It's a psychological reality. Jung explored this dynamic through the concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that aren't causally connected, yet reflect a deeper order at play. When your inner world becomes coherent, your outer world begins to mirror that coherence. Opportunities appear, relationships deepen, work finds purpose, not because you're manipulating reality, but because you're aligned with it. And when you're in that state, people feel it. They might not understand why they trust you, why they remember your words, why they feel safe around you, but they respond to the integrated energy you're radiating. In a world where most men are at war with themselves, wanting peace but creating conflict, chasing love while embodying neediness, seeking connection while operating from ego, you become exceptional simply by becoming whole. Developing a desexualized mind doesn't mean becoming less of a man. It means becoming more of one. It means establishing conscious relationship with desire, rather than being unconsciously driven by it. And ironically, this makes your sexuality more powerful, more sacred, more fulfilling, because now it flows from wholeness, not from emptiness, from connection, not from conquest. So, how does this transformation begin? It starts with psychological objectivity, the ability to observe your internal processes without immediately identifying with them. When desire arises, you don't become desire. You simply notice desire is present. And that small shift, it creates space. Space between stimulus and response, between feeling and action. It creates space for choice. But here's the hard part. To truly grow, you must confront your shadow. Not just the shadow of lust or shame, but all the disowned parts of yourself, your weakness, your fear, your dependency. Because these rejected aspects don't disappear when ignored. They go underground. They hijack your behavior when you're least aware. Carl Jung called the shadow a moral problem, one that demands real courage. He wrote, "No one becomes conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort." And here's the kicker. The less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. What does that mean? It means your shadow doesn't gain power from its content. It gains power from your refusal to face it. Misedna, alongside shadow work, you must also strengthen the ego, not inflate it, but fortify it enough to face the unconscious without being possessed by it. A weak ego gets swept up in whatever emotion is strongest. A strong ego stays centered, even when storms rise. And as the ego strengthens, and the shadow integrates, something powerful emerges, a new center. Not the ego itself, but the self, the true organizing force of your psyche. Jung explained this beautifully. He said the ego is the center of consciousness, but the self is the center of totality, conscious and unconscious alike. From relationship with the self comes inner authority. You no longer need constant validation. You're not driven by scarcity or insecurity. Why? Because you've connected with an inner source of value. This is where real confidence is born. Not the loud, brittle confidence of the ego, but the quiet certainty of a man who knows who he is. Jung even said the attainment of the self is nothing less than the finding of God. But not God as some external being. God as the center within. As this self becomes your new psychological compass, your life begins to orbit around something true. You're no longer controlled by unconscious drives. You're in dialogue with them. You're no longer possessed. You are conscious. This is the heart of Jung's process of individuation, becoming who you were always meant to be. But it can't happen while you're still identified with raw libido. That energy must be transformed, not indulged. And remember, this isn't a straight line. You'll have moments of clarity, followed by relapse. Moments of presence, followed by reactivity. That's okay, that's growth. Jung called it the circumambulation of the self, the spiral movement that brings you closer to your center with each cycle. This is the opus, the great psychological work. And just like the ancient alchemists turning base metals into gold, you are transforming base instinct, raw libido into conscious energy. Jung saw deep symbolism in alchemy, nigredo, confronting the shadow albedo, the emergence of new clarity rubido, the return of instinct, now purified and integrated. The desexualized mind corresponds with this final stage, not the repression of instinct, but its transcendence. And the rewards, they're everywhere. Your relationships deepen. Your work becomes meaningful. Your presence shifts from taking to giving, from needing to serving. In a world drowning in objectification, a man who has done this inner work stands out. He becomes a refuge, a beacon, a reminder of what's possible. If this message spoke to you, let it ripple outward. Like the video, leave a comment and share your reflections. Subscribe for more content that elevates your mind and your masculinity. Let's build a world where more men wake up, where more men find wholeness, not through domination. There's a kind of presence that changes the entire room, a presence that people feel, but can't quite explain. Women especially respond to it, not because you're charming, flashy, or skilled in technique, but because something rare radiates from you. It's the experience of being truly seen, not for what they can offer, but for who they are. You become that man everyone gravitates toward, not because you're trying to be noticed, but because you've become different. And that difference, it's not about tricks, it's about transformation. You've achieved what few men ever even attempt. Psychological differentiation from the very drives that unconsciously control most of the world. This is the real power. Carl Jung understood. This is the power of the desexualized mind. This is what sets you apart in a world designed to keep men reactive, fragmented, and ultimately powerless. So the question isn't, is this freedom possible? It is. The real question is, are you willing to do what's required to claim it as your own? Because when you develop a desexualized mind, when you liberate yourself from unconscious identification with desire, you don't become less of a man. You become what very few men ever become, a complete human being. And in that completeness lies a strength, a calm, centered power that others feel but can't quite name. So ask yourself, how long will you continue to live, driven by forces you don't recognize? How long will you mistake your reactions for choices? How long will you remain fragmented when integration is calling? The path to a desexualized mind isn't easy, but those who walk it discover this powerful truth. What truly matters has been within reach all along. Your liberation begins with a shift in awareness, from blind identification to conscious relationship, from being possessed by your desires to engaging with them from a stable center, from psychological slavery to the freedom that only consciousness can bring. And that shift changes everything. You change, and in that change lies the greatest power a man can possess, the power to choose your own path, to create your own meaning, to become the author, not the victim of your life. And when you do that, the world responds, not because you're manipulating it, but because you've aligned yourself with something real, with something ancient. Because wholeness attracts wholeness, consciousness creates order, and the integrated psyche begins to magnetize coherent circumstances. Jung said it perfectly, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The desexualized mind reverses that equation. What once felt like fate becomes choice. What once was reactive becomes intentional. What once pulled you down now lifts you up. This is the power Jung devoted his life to. This is the weapon modern man so desperately needs. To those who have, more will be given. This isn't mysticism, it's psychological reality. When you break identification with undifferentiated desire, you create a field of coherence, and that field naturally attracts what resonates with it. Opportunities, relationships, purpose, meaning. Not because you're chasing them, but because you've become the kind of man those things are drawn to. Women feel this instantly. They might not know why they trust you, why they open up to you, why they remember your words when others fade. But their bodies know. Their intuition knows. They're in the presence of something increasingly rare. A man who sees them rather than uses them. A man who embodies the desexualized mind. And in today's world, a world designed for distraction, for unconsciousness, for fragmentation, this is the greatest freedom a man can achieve. The power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from mastering yourself. So the choice is yours. Will you remain reactive, driven by forces you don't understand? Or will you begin the journey toward psychological freedom, toward becoming one of the rarest men alive? A man who has achieved basic differentiation in a world drowning in unconscious identification. Because everything changes when you're no longer controlled by undifferentiated libido. You change. And that change, that's not the end of your power, Carl Jung. It's the beginning of a power most men never experience. The power that comes from psychological wholeness. If this message resonated with you, don't just scroll away. Drop a comment below. Like the video. Subscribe for more content that challenges the modern male psyche and inspires transformation. You've just heard a truth most will never dare confront. But if you're still here, you're not like most men. And the journey has only just begun. But through integration,